My mother handed me a folded sheet of paper in the church lobby and whispered, "Say every word exactly the way we practiced." My father stood beside her with his jaw clenched, staring at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong family. Across the room, my sister Delaney sat in the front pew, wearing a cream-colored dress and the expression of someone prepared to receive an award. The paper was an apology. Not a private apology. Not a conversation after service. My parents wanted me to stand in front of everyone at Grace Harbor Community Church in Columbus, Ohio, and apologize to Delaney for ruining her life. They wanted me to say I had been jealous, unstable, cruel, and selfish. They wanted me to tell the people who had watched me grow up that I had destroyed my sister's marriage, her business, and her chance to start over. I was 32 years old and I worked as a payroll coordinator for a regional construction company. I spent most of my days checking numbers twice, making sure people got paid correctly, catching mistakes before they became disasters. It was not glamorous work, but it had taught me something important. Numbers did not care who cried the loudest. Records did not bend because a mother called something family. Facts did not disappear because someone had spent years being adored. My parents had always treated Delaney like a fragile thing the rest of us were responsible for protecting. She was 4 years younger than me, prettier in the way people noticed immediately, louder in the way adults confused with confidence. When Delaney broke something, someone else had been careless. When Delaney failed, someone else had not supported her enough. When Delaney hurt someone, there was always a reason we were expected to understand. When I was 12, she tore apart the science fair project I had spent 3 weeks building because she said I made her look stupid. My mother told me not to be dramatic. When I was 16, Delaney borrowed my savings envelope from my dresser and used it to buy a dress for homecoming. My father said she would pay me back when she could. She never did. When I was 19, she wrecked Grandpa Everett's old Ford truck after taking it without permission. Then told everyone I had left the keys where she could find them. That was the first time I learned how easily a family could make you guilty of something you never did. Grandpa Everett had believed me. He was the only one who had looked at me after the truck accident and asked, "What happened?" Not "Why did you do this?" Not "Why were you so careless?" He had asked a real question, then waited for my answer. That small kindness had felt almost dangerous. I remember sitting at his kitchen table with my hands shaking around a glass of sweet tea while he listened to every word. He never yelled at Delaney in front of us. That was not his way. But after she left his house that night, cheeks red and eyes narrowed, Grandpa put one hand over mine and said, "Cora, there are people who survive by making someone else carry the weight of what they break." I did not understand what he meant then. I understood it later. The church lobby smelled like coffee, cinnamon rolls, and rain-damp coats. Families moved around us with Bibles tucked under their arms. Mrs. Callahan from the choir smiled at me as she passed, then looked away when she saw my mother's face. Everyone knew something was wrong. They had known for weeks, ever since Delaney's boutique closed and her husband moved out of their house. According to my parents, it was all because of me. Delaney had opened a small bridal shop 18 months earlier. My mother called it her fresh start. My father called it the family investment. They borrowed money against their house. They convinced Grandpa Everett to put in part of his retirement savings. They asked me to help with the books because Delaney said numbers made her anxious and vendors intimidated her. I had said yes because that was what I had been trained to do. I had said yes because every time I tried to say no, my parents found a way to make it sound like I was punishing Delaney for being loved. I built spreadsheets, organized invoices called suppliers, and spent weekends sitting behind the counter while Delaney posted pictures of champagne walls and satin ribbons online. At first, the store looked successful. Delaney knew how to make everything look beautiful. She filled the shop with white roses, gold mirrors, and dresses that cost more than most of the women in our neighborhood made in a month. She posted smiling videos about helping brides feel seen and celebrated. People commented with heart emojis. My mother shared every post with captions about how proud she was. But beautiful did not mean stable. The first problem was the credit card bills. Delaney was buying inventory she had not sold yet, ordering custom display pieces, hosting launch parties, paying influencers, and covering personal expenses through the business account. I found restaurant charges, hotel deposits, cosmetic appointments, and a weekend trip to Nashville labeled as vendor research. When I asked her about it, she laughed like I had made a joke. "You're always so intense," she said. "This is why nobody wants to work with you." I told her the numbers did not work. She told me numbers were not everything. Then she looked at me across the back office desk and said, "You know what your problem is, Cora. You see a happy woman and immediately assume she must be doing something wrong. That sentence stayed with me because it was so perfectly Delaney. She could turn any question into an attack. She could turn any boundary into jealousy. She could take the truth and hold it upside down until everyone else saw it backwards. I tried to talk to my parents privately. My father barely looked at the paperwork I brought him. My mother folded her arms and said Delaney was under enough pressure without me trying to make her feel like a failure. I told them the business was weeks away from missing payroll and months behind on 2 major suppliers. My father said, then help your sister fix it, instead of standing there with your little spreadsheets acting superior. That was when I stopped working for the boutique. I did not report Delaney. I did not call her husband. I did not tell the churchwomen who had been ordering bridesmaid dresses. I simply resigned from handling the books and sent a clean record of every transaction to my father, my mother, Delaney, and the accountant they had hired too late. I told them I would not put my name on anything I could not verify. For 3 weeks, nobody spoke to me. Then Delaney's husband Mark found the accounts. He was not dramatic about it. He did not scream at her in public or post vague messages online. He called me one evening and asked if I had known about a transfer from their joint savings account into the boutique. I told him I had seen it, but I had never been authorized to move money or access their personal account. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think she's been lying to everyone. The boutique shut down 2 months later. By then the suppliers were demanding payment, the landlord had changed the locks, and Mark had moved into an apartment across town. Delaney told my parents that I had sabotaged her. She said I had scared off the accountant, poisoned Mark against her, and waited for her to fail because I could not stand seeing her happy. My mother believed every word. My father did not even ask me what happened. They chose their version because it was easier than admitting what had been in front of them all along. Grandpa Everett died 6 months after the store closed. He had been sick for a while, though he had kept it quiet until he could not anymore. Delaney cried at the funeral louder than anyone. My mother held her like she was still a child. My father stood beside the casket, thanking people for coming, telling them Grandpa had been the heart of the family. I stayed near the back. There was a sealed envelope on the memorial table beside Grandpa's photograph. It had my name on it in his careful block handwriting. I saw it before the service began. I also saw my mother pick it up, read the front, and slide it into her purse without saying a word. When I asked her about it afterward, she told me Grandpa had written a lot of confused things near the end. She said she did not want me getting upset over something that probably did not matter. I was too tired to fight her that day. Grief made me quiet in a way she mistook for surrender. But I remembered the envelope. 3 weeks ago, Pastor Wallace called me at work. He had been Grandpa's closest friend for more than 40 years, the kind of man who visited people in hospitals and remembered the names of their grandchildren. His voice sounded careful when he asked whether I could meet him after Wednesday Bible study. He did not tell me why over the phone. When I arrived, he was sitting alone in his office with a wooden box on his desk. The box had belonged to Grandpa. I recognized the brass latch, the worn corners, the small burn mark on one side from a 4th of July cookout years ago. Pastor Wallace rested his hand on it for a moment before looking up at me. Your grandfather asked me to hold on to something, he said. He gave me very specific instructions about when it should be opened. I felt my throat tighten. Is it the letter he wrote me? Pastor Wallace nodded once. Before he could say anything else, the church office door opened. My mother stood there, pale and furious. She had followed me. I knew it from the way she was breathing, like she had rushed across the parking lot. You will not drag our family through another scene, she said. Pastor Wallace looked at her, then at me. He did not open the box that night. He simply locked it in the church safe and told us both quietly that some things had a way of finding the right moment. Now, standing in the lobby before Sunday service, my mother pressed the apology paper into my hand again. My father leaned close enough that I could smell his aftershave. You will do this, he said. You embarrassed your sister. You humiliated this family. Today, you make it right. I looked past him toward the sanctuary doors. Pastor Wallace was standing near the pulpit. And in his hand was Grandpa Everett's wooden box. The sanctuary was already half full when my parents walked me down the center aisle. They did not take my arms, but they did not need to. My mother stayed close enough for her sleeve to brush mine while my father moved behind me like he was making sure I did not turn around and leave. Every familiar face in the room seemed suddenly unfamiliar. People I had known since childhood watched me pass with worried eyes, pretending not to notice the folded apology in my hand. Delaney sat in the first row beside my aunt and uncle. Her mascara was perfect. Her hands were folded neatly over a small white purse. She looked tired in the way people look when they know others are watching them suffer. But when our eyes met, I saw something else underneath it. Relief. She believed the moment had finally come when I would carry her shame for her the way I had carried so many smaller things before. Pastor Wallace did not begin with the usual welcome. He stood behind the pulpit in his dark gray suit, one hand resting beside Grandpa's wooden box. His expression was calm, but I had known him long enough to recognize when calm meant he was holding back anger. He looked at me first, then at my parents, then at the whole congregation. "Before we begin," he said, "I understand there is a family matter that has been brought into this room." My father stepped forward before I could answer. "Yes, Pastor. Cora wants to say something to her sister. We felt it was important that she take responsibility." The word responsibility hung in the air. My mother nodded quickly. "Delaney has been through enough. She deserves an apology. The whole church has seen the damage this situation caused." She said it softly, like softness made it true. "We want to heal as a family." I had heard that word used against me so many times that it barely sounded like a real word anymore. Heal. It always meant I was supposed to accept what happened without naming it. It meant I should apologize for reacting, not them for hurting me. It meant peace was only possible if I stayed small enough to fit inside their version of the story. Pastor Wallace looked at me. "Cora, do you want to speak?" My mother's fingers tightened around my elbow. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was my father's. He had written each sentence in black ink, clean and deliberate. "I'm sorry for interfering in Delaney's marriage. I'm sorry for making people doubt her. I'm sorry for acting out of jealousy. I'm sorry for bringing embarrassment to our family." I read the words once, then again, and felt something inside me settle instead of break. For years I thought my fear of disappointing my parents was love. I thought the panic that came whenever they were angry meant I cared about family. Standing there with that paper trembling between my fingers, I finally understood it was something else. It was training. They had taught me that their comfort mattered more than my dignity. They had taught me that Delaney's feelings were emergencies and mine were inconveniences. I looked at my sister. "Did you write this?" Delaney blinked. "The apology. Did you tell Mom and Dad what you wanted me to say?" Her face changed so quickly that only I would have noticed. The sadness vanished first, then the softness. What remained was annoyance. "Cora, don't make this harder than it already is. I asked you a question." My father made a sound under his breath. "Enough. Read the apology." Delaney looked down at her hands. "I didn't write it word for word. But yes, I told them what happened. I told them what you did." Her voice was quiet and shaking in a way that made several people in the front pews lean closer. "You knew Mark was already upset with me. You knew the store was struggling, and you kept pushing things until he left." That was the version she had been repeating for months. I had pushed. I had sabotaged. I had ruined her life because I could not stand her happiness. The story had become so polished that even she seemed to believe it now. Nobody ever asked why a husband would leave over one spreadsheet. Nobody asked why vendors had stopped answering calls. Nobody asked why the boutique account had been emptied twice before I ever resigned. I folded the paper slowly. "Mark didn't leave because I pushed him. He left because he found out you used $78,000 from his savings account without telling him." A sharp silence moved through the sanctuary. My mother stepped toward me at once. "That is not what happened." "It is exactly what happened. Those were family finances," she said, her voice getting tighter. "Delaney was trying to save the business. She was overwhelmed. You know she was overwhelmed." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. She transferred money from an account Mark had been saving for years. She used it to pay overdue vendor invoices and then used the business card for a weekend at the Bellamy Hotel. That isn't being overwhelmed. That is lying. Delaney stood up. "You don't know what it was like. I know what the bank statements showed." "You always have to make everything about receipts and numbers," she snapped. "You never cared what I was going through." There it was. The sentence she always used when facts cornered her. She did not deny them. She made emotion the only thing that mattered. She made my refusal to ignore reality sound like cruelty. For a moment I saw the younger version of myself standing in my parents' kitchen trying to explain why my savings envelope was gone while Delaney cried about how ashamed she felt. Pastor Wallace raised one hand. "This is not the place for an argument." My father turned toward him, grateful for the interruption. "Exactly. That's why Cora needs to apologize. We are trying to move forward. Dragging old financial matters into church is not helping anyone." "Old financial matters," I repeated. My father's eyes hardened. "You know what I mean?" "No," I said. "I don't think I do." I had spent months swallowing the truth because I did not want to be the person who made church uncomfortable. I had protected my parents from questions they did not deserve protection from. I had protected Delaney from consequences she had earned. And every time I chose silence, they used it as proof that their story was right. Pastor Wallace looked down at the wooden box beside him. His fingers hovered over the brass latch but did not open it. "Cora," he said carefully, "there may be something you should know before you decide what you want to say today." My mother went pale. It was not dramatic at first. She did not gasp or cry. She simply stared at the box like it had become dangerous. Then, she walked toward the pulpit with a speed that made my father turn sharply in surprise. "That box is private," she said. "Everett was sick when he gave you anything. He wasn't thinking clearly." Pastor Wallace did not move. "Your father was very clear. You don't understand our family." "No," he said quietly. "But I understood Everett." My mother's face tightened. He loved Delaney. He would never want this turned into some public attack on her. Pastor Wallace looked at her with a sadness that made my stomach drop. "I believe he loved both of his granddaughters." My father stepped in front of my mother. "This is getting out of hand. We came here to settle a personal issue, not to have a dead man's private thoughts used against us." The phrase, "a dead man's private thoughts," stayed with me. Not because it sounded respectful, because it sounded afraid. My father had never been afraid of Grandpa Everett when he was alive. He had argued with him, dismissed him, rolled his eyes when Grandpa questioned Delaney's choices. But now, looking at that small wooden box, my father's hands were shaking. Pastor Wallace finally spoke to the room. "I will not open this box during service unless it becomes necessary. But I need everyone to understand something. Everett gave it to me 1 week before he passed. He told me there had been too much confusion, too much blame, and too much silence in this family. He said the truth should not be buried just because it made people uncomfortable." No one moved. I could hear the old ceiling fan turning above us. I could hear someone in the back of the church clear their throat. I could hear Delaney's breathing from the front pew. She had gone completely still, her eyes fixed on the box. My mother looked at me then, and for the first time that morning I saw something besides anger. I saw fear. Not fear that I would embarrass her. Fear that she had lost control of the story. "You don't know what Grandpa wrote," she said to me. "You don't know whether he was confused or upset. He was old, Cora. He had good days and bad days." "He had a better memory than you gave him credit for," I said. Her lips pressed together. I remembered the last conversation I had ever had with Grandpa. It had been 2 weeks before he went into hospice. I was sitting beside his bed at the house, sorting a stack of old receipts he insisted on keeping in a cigar box. His hands were thinner than I remembered, but his voice was steady when he asked whether Delaney had paid back the money she took from the boutique account. I had frozen. I had never told him about that. When I asked how he knew, he gave me a tired smile. "Your sister thinks people don't notice things because they don't confront her. That's not the same as not noticing." I asked him what I should do. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Stop trying to earn love from people who only offer it when you disappear." At the time I had cried, quietly because I did not want him to see. Grandpa reached over and squeezed my hand. Then he told me he had made arrangements. He did not explain what that meant. He only said, "When the right moment comes, you will understand why I kept asking you to pay attention." Now, standing in the church where my parents wanted me to apologize for Delaney's lies, I understood that he had been preparing for this long before I knew it. Pastor Wallace asked the congregation to take their seats. My father tried to protest, but the pastor's voice had changed. It was still calm. It was still gentle, but it had the finality of someone who had spent his life knowing when a room needed order. "We will begin service," he said. "And afterward the Wallace family and the Harper family will remain." My mother whispered something vicious under her breath. Delaney sat down slowly, her eyes wet now, though I could not tell whether the tears came from guilt or fear. My father stared at me as if I had planned every second of this. Maybe that was easier for him than realizing I had simply stopped obeying. I took the apology paper, folded it once more, and placed it in my purse. I did not read a single word. As the first hymn began, Pastor Wallace lifted Grandpa's wooden box from the pulpit and carried it into his office. He locked the door behind him. But before he did, he turned back toward me and said only one thing. "Cora, after service bring the ledger Grandpa told you to keep." My breath caught. Because there was only one ledger Grandpa had ever asked me to keep. And my parents had no idea it existed. The ledger was not hidden in a safe, or locked inside some dramatic old trunk. It sat in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet at home, inside a plain blue accordion folder, labeled, Bridal, Shop, Backup. I had made it the week I resigned from Delaney's business. Every invoice, bank, export vendor, email, deposit slip, and payroll note was organized by date. I had kept it because payroll had taught me one thing: when people start saying, "Trust me," right after the numbers stop making sense. You save everything. I drove home after church service with my hands steady on the wheel, though my chest felt like it had been tied shut. My parents had stayed behind with Pastor Wallace. Delaney had left through the side entrance without saying goodbye. I watched her disappear into the parking lot through the rearview mirror, her cream dress bright against the gray morning. For once she did not have our mother holding her hand. For once I did not follow her. My apartment was 20 minutes away, on the third floor of an old brick building near Franklin Park. Nothing about it was impressive. The kitchen was small. The hallway carpet smelled faintly of dust in summer, but it was mine. No one could walk in and tell me how to feel. No one could demand I hand over the truth because it made them uncomfortable. I stood in my living room, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out the blue folder. Under the records was a smaller notebook with a black cover and a red elastic band. Grandpa Everett had given it to me 6 months before he died. He had bought it from a grocery store checkout aisle, the kind of place where people usually picked up gum or batteries. He had placed it on the table between us and said, "Write down what people say when they think nobody will hold them to it." At first I thought he meant Delaney, but Grandpa had looked at me and said, "Not just her." Then he tapped the notebook with one bent finger. "Your parents have spent years calling their choices love. Write down the difference." I had done it because he asked me to. I had written dates, conversations, meetings, and the exact phrases people used when they wanted me to carry something that belonged to them. There was an entry from the day my father told me to make the vendor balances look less urgent before Grandpa saw them. Another from the day my mother said Delaney had borrowed money from Mark, because a wife should not have to explain every decision she makes to her husband. There was the night Delaney called me crying because she had transferred money from the boutique account to cover a hotel bill, then screamed at me when I refused to delete the transaction from the bookkeeping software. The last entry was written in Grandpa's handwriting. He had asked me to leave the notebook at his house while I stayed with him one afternoon. I had forgotten it beside his recliner. When I found it later, there was one new sentence written beneath my own notes. "Cora did not cause this. She only refused to lie about it." I sat on my couch for a long time, with that page open on my lap. I had read it before, but never when the whole family story was beginning to crack apart. There was something about seeing Grandpa's handwriting after my mother had tried to turn me into the villain in church that made the words feel heavier. Not because they fixed what had happened, they did not, but because someone had seen it clearly, while I still believed I was losing my mind. At 2:30, Pastor Wallace called. "Are you ready to come back?" he asked. I looked at the blue folder, the black notebook, and the sealed envelope I had found tucked inside the back flap. The envelope was addressed to him, not me. In Grandpa's handwriting, it said, "For Pastor Wallace, if they try to make Cora carry it." "I'm ready," I said. The church was empty when I returned. Sunday sunlight came through the stained glass windows in thin strips of blue, gold, and red. It made the pews look softer than they were. My parents were sitting in the front row, separated by a few inches of silence. Delaney sat at the end of the same pew with her purse on her lap. Her face looked different without a crowd around her. Smaller, not innocent, just less protected. My mother stood when she saw the folder in my hands. "You brought it," she said. It was not a question. "I brought what Pastor Wallace asked for." My father stood next. "Cora, this has gone far enough." I looked at him. "You said that this morning too." "You're making a mistake," he said. "Your sister is already drowning. Do you really want to be the person who pushes her under?" The old guilt tried to rise in me. It had been trained into my body so deeply that sometimes it arrived before thought. But I looked down at the blue folder and remembered every hour I had spent correcting Delaney's numbers while she posted photos of champagne glasses and lace gowns. I remembered the way my father had called me superior for telling the truth. Then I looked back at him. "She is not drowning because I pushed her," I said. "She is drowning because everyone kept pretending the water wasn't there." Delaney flinched. My mother began to cry. Quietly at first. Then louder when she realized no one was moving to comfort her. "You don't understand what this has done to us," she said. "Your father and I could lose the house. Delaney has already lost her marriage. People in this church are talking. We are trying to protect this family by making me confess to things I didn't do. We were trying to stop the gossip." "No," I said. "You were trying to give them someone to blame." Pastor Wallace came out of his office carrying Grandpa's wooden box. He placed it on the front pew between us. The brass latch caught the sunlight. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even my father seemed to understand that whatever happened next could not be pulled back into the shape they wanted. Pastor Wallace looked at the folder in my hands. "May I?" I handed it to him. He opened it slowly, not like someone searching for a weapon but like someone reading the final pages of a story he had already feared was true. He looked through the transaction logs first, then the vendor notices, then the account reconciliation report I had sent to my parents months earlier. The report showed the exact dates Delaney had moved money, the personal charges, the unpaid invoices, and the messages she had sent me asking which records could be cleaned up. My father leaned forward. "Those are internal business matters." Pastor Wallace did not look up. "They are also matters you used to accuse Cora of sabotage." My mother wiped her face. "She should have helped her sister." "She did," I said, "for nearly a year." Delaney finally spoke. Her voice was low. "You could have warned me." I stared at her. "I did." "You could have told me it was getting worse." "I did." "You could have helped me fix it." "I tried." Her mouth opened, then closed. I did not say it cruelly. I did not raise my voice. That was the strangest part. All my life I thought I needed to become louder to be heard by my family. But the truth did not need volume, it only needed room. Pastor Wallace opened the black notebook next. He read several pages without speaking. Then he turned to the last page where Grandpa's handwriting sat beneath mine. His face changed. Not surprise, recognition. "He told you to document these conversations," he said. "Yes." "Did he explain why?" "Not completely." Pastor Wallace nodded, then reached into the wooden box. He took out 3 items, a small key, a sealed letter with my name on it, and another sealed letter marked "For the church elder board, if necessary." My mother made a sound that was almost a gasp. "What is that?" she asked. Pastor Wallace held up the second envelope. "Your father knew." My father's face went white. I looked at him. "Knew what?" He did not answer. Pastor Wallace looked at the date on the envelope. This was written 8 days before Everett passed. He turned it over. "And he instructed me not to open it unless someone publicly blamed Cora for Delaney's business failure or pressured her to make a false apology." No one moved. The silence was different now. It was no longer the silence my parents had used to control me. It belonged to the truth waiting in the room. My mother turned toward my father. "You knew he wrote something." My father's eyes stayed on the envelope. "He was sick." "That is not an answer." He was confused. "You keep saying that," I said. "But he was clear enough to predict exactly what you would do." My father looked at me then and I saw anger start to replace fear. "You think you're better than us because you kept paperwork, because you sat around writing down every ugly thing your family said." "No," I said. "I think I'm done pretending ugly things were love." Delaney stood abruptly. Her purse slipped from her lap and landed on the pew. "This is insane. Grandpa was always on Cora's side. He never understood me." My mother looked at her. "What does that mean?" Delaney's eyes filled with tears. "He treated me like I was some kind of criminal every time I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I asked. She turned toward me furious. "You don't know what it feels like to be the one everyone expects to succeed." For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Not because she was right, but because I could finally see the prison she had built for herself. Delaney had been praised so constantly that failure had become unbearable. She needed someone else to be wrong, because she had never learned how to sit with the possibility that she was. Then she said, "Mom and Dad told me you would understand." My mother froze. I looked at her. "They told you what?" Delaney realized too late what she had said. Her face drained of color. My father stepped forward. "Delaney, stop talking." But she was already crying. "They said Cora always came around. They said if I looked hurt enough she would apologize. They said she hated conflict too much to make a scene." Something inside me went completely still. My mother covered her mouth. My father turned on Delaney so quickly that she took a step back. "You are not helping yourself." "No," I said softly. "She's helping me." Pastor Wallace placed the letters on the pulpit. Then he opened Grandpa's wooden box farther and removed a folded document tied with a faded blue ribbon. He looked at me before unfolding it. "This is a statement Everett asked me to witness," he said. "It concerns the money he invested in Delaney's boutique." My father looked toward the sanctuary doors. Not because he planned to leave. Because he was calculating whether he could. Pastor Wallace untied the ribbon and read the first line silently. Then he looked up at all of us. "Cora," he said, "your grandfather did not only leave a letter. He placed the document beside the folder. He left a record of who asked him to hide the truth." Pastor Wallace unfolded the document, tied with the faded blue ribbon, and read it without rushing. It was not a will. It was not a secret fortune. It was a signed statement Grandpa Everett had prepared with his accountant after he realized the boutique was failing. The money he had given Delaney was not a gift, and it was not a family investment the way my parents had described it. It was a personal loan to Delaney documented in writing, with repayment terms she had ignored. Then Pastor Wallace opened the letter addressed to me. "Cora," he began reading Grandpa's words aloud. "If this letter is being read, then someone has tried to make you accept blame for a mess you did not create. I am sorry I did not stop it sooner. I saw your family ask you to carry their shame because you were the one person they trusted to be responsible." My mother sat down hard on the front pew. My father stayed standing, but his shoulders dropped slightly, like a man realizing he had run out of places to hide. Delaney stared at the floor. The church was so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the old lights above us. Pastor Wallace kept reading. Grandpa wrote that he had watched Delaney avoid calls from suppliers, watched my mother excuse missing money as temporary pressure, and watched my father insist that everyone protect Delaney's reputation before anyone protected the cow's truth. He wrote that my father came to him one night and asked him to sign a new document, calling the loan a gift. Grandpa had refused. "Your father told me," Pastor Wallace read. "Delaney needs us. Cora will be fine. Cora always lands on her feet." I have thought about those words every day since. They sounded like confidence in you, but they were an excuse to leave you alone. I looked at my father. For years I had mistaken that sentence for praise. Cora will be fine. Cora can handle it. Cora does not need as much. But hearing it through Grandpa's letter, I finally heard what it really meant. They had not believed I was stronger. They had simply decided I was safer to disappoint. My father's face hardened. "Everett was bitter," he said. "He never understood what it meant to have two daughters in crisis at once." Pastor Wallace lowered the letter. "He understood exactly what it meant." "No," my father snapped. "He saw Delaney struggling and turned it into a moral failure. She was trying to build something. She made mistakes. So what families help each other?" "Families do help each other," I said. "They do not write false apologies and force one daughter to confess to another daughter's choices." My father turned toward me. "You have no idea what your mother and I have sacrificed." The words landed differently than they once had. Before that morning, they would have made my stomach twist. I would have started listing every way I had tried to help, every weekend I gave up, every account I reconciled, every call I made. But I did not need to prove my effort anymore, my con. "I know exactly what you sacrificed," I said. "You sacrificed the truth whenever it was easier than disappointing Delaney." My mother began crying again. This time she did not look at me. She looked at my father. "Is that true?" she asked him. "Did you ask Dad to call it a gift?" My father did not answer. "Arthur," she said louder now. "Did you?" He looked toward the stained glass windows, then toward the open sanctuary doors. "I was trying to protect this family." My mother's face folded in on itself. You told me Grandpa had changed his mind about the money. I thought he would, my father said. He was sick. I thought he would realize what mattered. What mattered, I said quietly, was making sure Delaney did not have consequences. Delaney stood up so suddenly that the pew creaked behind her. Her mascara had finally started to run. She looked at my father with an expression I had never seen on her before, not fear of getting caught, but fear of discovering she had never been as protected as she believed. You told me Cora would fix it, she said. My father looked at her sharply. Delaney. You did, she said. You said she was good with money. You said she would help us figure out the bills. You said she would calm Mark down because she always made things sound reasonable. Her voice broke on the last word. I could have taken that moment and made it cruel. I could have reminded her that I warned her. I could have listed every time she mocked me for being careful, every time she called me jealous, every time she turned her mistakes into my burden. But looking at her standing there, I saw something that surprised me. Delaney had spent her whole life being rescued. She had never been taught how to stand when nobody was holding her up. That did not excuse what she had done. It only explained why she kept reaching for someone else when the truth got too heavy. Pastor Wallace set the letter down and opened the second envelope from Grandpa's box. Inside was a copy of the loan agreement, a note from Grandpa's accountant, and a letter naming an independent executor for the estate. Grandpa had anticipated that my parents might try to bury the debt after he died. He had made sure they could not quietly rewrite it. The executor had already been notified. Delaney's unpaid loan would be handled through the estate. It would be deducted from anything she might have inherited, and the records would be provided to the accountant overseeing Grandpa's final affairs. There would be no public spectacle, no handcuffs, no dramatic courtroom speech, just a clean, documented consequence that could no longer be talked away. My father sat down beside my mother. For the first time in my life, he looked old. Pastor Wallace looked at me. There is one more thing Everett asked me to do. He lifted the letter again. He requested that if anyone pressured you to make a false apology in this church, I should make a correction to the congregation. My mother looked up quickly. Please don't. It was the first time she had asked for something without commanding it. Pastor Wallace did not answer her. He looked at me instead. The choice was mine. I thought about the congregation watching me walk down the aisle with that paper in my hand. I thought about Mrs. Callahan looking away. I thought about how quickly people believed the quiet daughter had done something terrible because the crying daughter said she had. Then I thought about Grandpa's handwriting beneath mine. Cora did not cause this. She only refused to lie about it. Yes, I said. Correct it. My mother closed her eyes. I do not want Delaney humiliated, I continued. I do not want people guessing at every financial detail. But I will not carry a lie so this family can look better in public. Pastor Wallace can tell them I was asked to apologize for things I did not do and that I will not be doing that. Pastor Wallace nodded once. That is fair. My father stood again, anger flashing through his embarrassment. You are tearing this family apart over paperwork. I looked at him for a long moment. No, I said. I am refusing to keep it glued together with my own skin. That was the closest I came to raising my voice all day. My father stared at me. Then he looked away first. The meeting ended without a hug, without a prayer circle, without one of those forced moments my mother used to create when she wanted everyone to pretend the hard part was over. Pastor Wallace walked my parents and Delaney to the church office where the executor's contact information was waiting. I stayed in the sanctuary alone for a few minutes. The apology paper was still in my purse. I took it out, smoothed it across the front pew, and read every sentence one last time. I'm sorry for interfering. I'm sorry for jealousy. I'm sorry for bringing embarrassment to our family. Then I tore it in half. Not violently, not like a movie. I folded it once, then twice, and separated the pieces with both hands. I dropped them into the church recycling bin near the back doors. The sound was small. It should have felt dramatic after all those years. Instead, it felt ordinary. 3 weeks later, Pastor Wallace spoke briefly before Sunday service. He did not name Delaney's financial details. He did not expose my parents' private conversations. He simply told the congregation that a false accusation had been made against me and that I would not be apologizing for conduct that was not mine. He said Grace Harbor was not a place where someone should be pressured to confess just to make another person comfortable. Several people found me afterward. Some apologized for believing what they heard. Some admitted they had wondered why I had been so quiet. Mrs. Callahan held my hands and cried, then told me she was sorry she had looked away in the lobby. I thanked her, but I did not make her feel better for it. I was learning that forgiveness did not require me to perform comfort for people who had failed to protect me. Delaney moved out of the house she had shared with Mark and took a job at a floral warehouse outside the city. I heard that she started meeting with a financial counselor. I heard she stopped calling my parents every time something went wrong. I did not know whether that would last. I did not make myself responsible for finding out. She sent me one message a month later. I was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say it without Mom and Dad standing in the room. I read it twice before replying. I hope you build a life where you do not need someone else to be the villain. That was all. My mother called several times after that. I did not answer at first. Then, one afternoon I picked up. She cried before she spoke, which used to make me panic. This time I waited. I thought protecting Delaney was what mothers did, she said. You protected her from reality, I answered. And you taught her that hurting me was acceptable. She was quiet for a long time. I am sorry, she said. It was not enough to repair everything. It was not supposed to be. But it was the first apology I had ever heard from her that did not include an excuse attached to it. I told her I needed distance. I told her I would decide later what kind of relationship, if any, was possible. Then I ended the call. A month after that, I went to Grandpa's old house with the executor to collect the things he had left me. There was no surprise mansion, no impossible inheritance. Grandpa had left me his wooden box, his old kitchen clock, and the small blue porch key from the house where he had taught me how to plant tomatoes, change a tire, and recognize when someone was trying to make me doubt myself. The porch was empty when I stepped outside. I stood there with the key in my palm, and remembered Grandpa telling me that silence was not surrender. Sometimes silence was observation, sometimes it was survival, but eventually, there came a moment when staying quiet did not keep the peace anymore. It only kept the lie alive. My parents had wanted me to apologize at church because they thought I was still the girl who would bend until something inside her broke. They thought I would lower my head, repeat their words, and make Delaney's story easier to believe. But Grandpa had left behind more than a letter. He left me the proof that I had never been the problem. And for the first time I believed it.